Warning, the following video has flashing lights and also includes content that may be deemed inappropriate for some viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. Jami King, you have ventured into the fox den and awoken me from my slumber. This must mean you and I need to team up again to hunt the Dogman. Much better. I was feeling a tad under the weather, yet now that I am fully revamped, recharged, and ready to rumble, it's time for Jami King and myself to walk into the madness.
Stood up. I said, oh my god, it's a werewolf. And everybody in the car freaked out.
My creatures of the night. Yes, once again, you have found your way into the darkness of the Fox Den for another episode of Midnight Lycanthropy here on LordeStarfox Radio. Lately, yes, we've been on a roll with having small town monsters sitting around the late night fire and helping us burn the timber into the early hours of the morning. And what if I told you, yes, we now have another member sitting down with us, and also a good friend of mine who pops in with us when he can, but he's a very busy guy. But you should recognize the name Jami King because he has one of the most legendary, and in my opinion, a genuine, undocumented footprint on file with us here. So how you doing, man?
Hey, I'm doing good. Thank you for the introduction.
Hey, it's just facts, my friend. Definitely is something that everyone needs to know because, long story short, is unfortunately a lot of people don't get the proper recognition with their discoveries and their research, which is why I put out that huge video about Autumn Williams, which, you being a really big Sasquatch guy, I actually highly suggest you check that out and then dive into her, because I think you will enjoy a lot of her thought processes. But same thing, man. I mean, yeah, your name's on the footprint when we show them up in the videos, but it's important to let people get the stamp of approval that they deserve. No worries, man. Kudos.
I definitely want to get you a replica of that. I want to make a cast of the cast.
Dude,
So
it
you
would
guys
be
can
up
have it.
on my wall, man, right near all my autographs that I value, and also right near this werewolf mask that I am eventually going to mount on my wall. When I get a chance to actually go live more, that would be a legendary backdrop. Appreciate you, dude.
Yep, you're top of the list. You're going to get one.
Ha! Great stuff, man. You have been nothing but extremely cool to me. Like we were speaking about before we got up on here, too much drama out there. You're like me. I try to be as chill as possible, and I have horrible anxiety, so people stress me out in general. Don't really have many friends by choice. I'm sure people would like to be my friend, besides my pet squirrel, my tribe that my therapist more or less calls y'all. I keep with the people that don't stress me out. You always seemed like a cool dude before I even got a chance to sit down and talk with you. I believe the first time I ever saw you was on a Small Town Monsters episode where you and Jenny were talking about something, and also I believe Brian Seach was on there, or he might have been on another one. Then all of a sudden, I woke up one day. This is a long time later. Wow, speaking of Brian Seach, I got Monsters and Mysteries up in the background, and there he is, classic. Well, I ended up going into a group that I was invited to and tagged in a specific post. That's how I saw your footprint. As I reached out to you, started to get a chance to speak to you, I recognized your voice. And then when I enlarged your picture, I was like, no crap, dude. That's Jami. All right. Great stuff. Even before I had a chance to interact with you, you always had a cool swag and vibe to you, man. That's why I appreciate it and tried to link up with you as much as possible.
Well, thank you for linking up with me. Yeah, thank you. I'm kind of a lone wolf like you. I kind of stick to myself, but I think that my research is kind of just organically my research, and like when I can connect with people and help other people, then that's what I really like to do.
Beautiful stuff. You are an excellent researcher. I do love how you approach things on a very humorous slash kind of sarcastic note. The only thing I would have, rewound in time frame is maybe not had you go back to the exact spot in the middle of the night with just a little
No,
lantern.
no, you're right. That was a little unnerving.
Yeah, but besides that, everything else, man, I encourage you to keep on rolling. But that one, if that ever occurs again, let's maybe rethink that situation just a tad. But
Right, I definitely will. That's been on my mind.
yes, it's so funny. Just to the audience, real quick summarization of what Jami and I are speaking about is when he did get the legendary cast. Well, he called me and I was like, yeah, let's try to actually get a cast of this footprint. Little did I know he was heading back out into the darkness of the night. Yes, it was pretty dark. And he had a lantern, it looked like, as he's casting this footprint. On one end, that is absolutely legendary stuff. But on the other spectrum, I do believe that's probably how some people disappear.
That is, and actually, it crossed my mind thinking about all the Dogman reports and incidents with Bigfoot in that area. So it was on my mind the whole time, and I had to be on the phone with somebody. So you happen to be that person.
Which is awesome. I do appreciate it. Let's say it would have been pretty traumatizing to then hear that attack occur and the phone cut out, right? Something out of, well, a B flick werewolf movie that actually turned real.
That's how scary movies start.
This is very true. To the audience tonight, we have two strange encounters that happened potentially. Yes, I use the word potentially because we don't fully know what occurred. I personally and my science team here at the Midnight Society have an interesting take on one of the victims. The other victim, though, just got me and everybody else I know that is brilliant and I like to link up with. I'm not saying I'm brilliant. I said everybody else I know that's brilliant. Got us all scratching our heads right now. Before we dive into that, Jami, what have you been looking into? Anything Dogman related, or have you just been pretty much trying to figure out what's going on with your Sasquatch research?
Well, I mean, like my wife and I both researched. So, like the Dogman print that we actually found, we were just talking about this earlier. We came across that accidentally. We weren't looking for anything. We were just hiking. So that was something that we found. So when I find something anomalous in the woods, that's usually what we're doing, is usually hiking. So when we find stuff, then we add it to our archive of research, and we look at it, we study it, and like if Dogman happens to be part of that spectrum that we're looking at, then that's where it's at. So that's how I kind of got in connection with you and Small Town Monsters, really. But most of the research we do delves into like Sasquatch, but some of it's Dogman, and then we've actually gone into like the sea SETI with Dr. Stephen Greer and the protocol that he uses. So like if I can believe in one thing, then I can believe in another thing, then I can believe in another thing, as long as I'm doing the work to try to go ahead and find what I'm looking for. So that's kind of like that's kind of what we do. Like it's more on the aspect of personal experiences and then how we can document them and have our own library of information on each subject.
That is great stuff right there, man. We definitely have something else to conquer. But now that we have spoken about your track, you did tell me about what you thought was a strange thing that occurred to you in the room you had the track, correct? Would you like to touch base on that real quick?
We had like a shelf where we have a lot of our cast and stuff, and some of the stuff that was on there, weirdly enough, I was talking about the cast, and then all of a sudden the stuff fell off the shelf like out of nowhere. And it's just an anomalous thing that you hear within the communities. And I say communities because I'm talking about Dogman community, I'm talking about the Bigfoot community, where people have had experiences with things that happen within their homes, or even when they're out in the field, strange occurrences that don't quite make sense, that go on to a different level, and that's one of them. So it was like I was talking about the print and the cast, and then all of a sudden this whole shelf of things fell off. And like, I never have things like that happen in my house, but it was just one of those weird things that you kind of have to put in the back of your mind, like, what was that, and why did that happen? So it goes into this sort of archive of information that we have that falls into a category of I don't know.
Yeah, that's pretty gnarly stuff right there for sure. I mean, I could see how that would potentially disturb you a bit. Being in Pennsylvania, I have had a chance to speak to Brian. He, as well as many others, believe the Shenango dog boy has been put to rest. I'm one of those. I mean, after I spoke to him and how he tracked it all down, brilliant stuff. Yet Brian himself actually said he hasn't heard this variant, but there were, I believe, two sisters that were in the Pennsylvania area near this, okay? And their mom would always read them little tales, more or less. And this is from the mouth of these two sisters. They basically spent more time outside on the trails than they did inside, according to both of them and their parents. They were probably at least in their late 60s when they were saying this. I don't know how long ago Monsters and Myths in America did the Shenango Valley Dog Boy. Anyone can look that up out there. Well, this quote unquote dog boy or something more or less had rumors of being manifested from a cauldron of witches or people that were trying to be dark entity type magic figures. This thing looked half wolf and like half boy, meaning it had huge elongated canines according to them, and also glowing eyes. It ran so fast on all fours, also when it stood up bipedally. From the other aspect, when Brian and everyone else, we were diving into it, if this was a sickly boy and stuff, and even though he could run around on all fours, and they did have the cage to keep people from throwing rocks through and also him escaping, it did have basically an eye condition that would make his eyes red. That is all documented, and I agree with all that. But you have these two women that swear up and down, and the mother was there too, because the mother claimed once she screamed, "Stay away from my daughter," it like let go or lost its grip or something and ran away. But all three of them, the mother and the two daughters, swear that this was not a boy that was ill. Super interesting. I just wanted to hear your thought real quick before we start diving into what we're going to touch base on.
I mean, Brian Seach is a very well respected person, and I hold a lot of regard to him, and he's very well known in Pennsylvania as a researcher of all the phenomenon. And Brian and I have gone back and forth with this, and I agree probably mostly what he says about that being explainable with that hypertrichinosis where people can grow hair all over their body. So that was the part that they put to rest. But where you can add more to this story is there's been other claims of Dogman within the Shenango Valley. So Shenango Dog Boy and Dog Man are two different things. So there's Dog Man reports that come out of Mercer County, Pennsylvania, which is right on the Ohio border. And I've met with that witness that you're talking about with the two sisters. I met the one sister, Margie.
Yes.
And
Okay.
yes, Margie, I met her, and my wife actually grew up in that area, in that small little area of Pennsylvania, on the actual road. It's called Hopper Road. So it's a very well-known road in Shenango Valley in Mercer County. And that's where that incident occurred. But when I'm breathing new life into this story, is I've met other witnesses afterwards that told me similar things about a dog boy, but they put it on the other side of the lake. So this lake that is in the middle of all of this is called Shenango, and that's where I
Hmm.
research Bigfoot. So the phenomenon has come from like Bigfoot phenomenon, but there's also this dog boy. So on one side of the lake where this Hopper Road is, that's where the Margie story comes from. On the other side of the lake, there's also dog boy stories that come from that side. So I'm not sure, like, the stories that I've heard on the other side of the lake, which is closer to Ohio, people have claimed to have seen this thing near the Shenango. And there's actually a property. There's this one property where multiple witnesses have seen it. So there's new life bred into the story just
Wow.
from witnesses that we've interviewed.
Great stuff right there. Before I fully respond, I mean, how accurate was I on my depiction?
No, you summarized it very well. It was a mother and her two daughters, and this thing had come out. And legitimately, it sounds strange, but the thing had, I think, was actually even wearing clothes. Like it had some
Hmm.
kind of form of clothing on. And what I remember her telling me is that it came up, and Margie was the one that it grabbed her arm. So this woman is she's probably in her 80s now, but her
Okay.
story hasn't changed over the years. So that's the part that you have to think to yourself, when a person's story doesn't change over the years that they've told it, then there has to be some accuracy with it. And you pretty much described it exactly how she would have.
Goosebumps. That's creepy. Brilliant stuff by you as well, because you're an excellent researcher too. And I like how you just broke that down as well, because I think a portion of it is been solved with Brian and such, but near Ohio too, with all the Dogman stuff and the cynocephaly that wore clothing, it's interesting. It does seem like maybe there's something else potentially involved in the situation as well, meaning that the dog boy might not have been the same thing that potentially attacked these women, you know?
Right. And like you touched on the part about that people would do ceremonial things, and Shenango Valley and Mercer County has had strange stories about that. Like I think there was even Heather might have contacted me to ask me if I knew of a coven of people that worshipped werewolves and dogman type things, and I tried to actually go out into the community to get that kind of story from them, and I couldn't find it, but I have heard a few people talk about it. So there is this weird element of like, are people worshiping these things or what's going on? But
Hmm.
I'm still trying to find witnesses and talk to people out there. And Pennsylvania, in this part of the state, people are a little more provincial, where they don't come out and they're not sharing as much. Like they're a little backward with like telling people their story because they don't want to seem crazy. But I'm pretty good at helping people talk about things without feeling like they're crazy.
It's really hard to walk that line of trying to figure out if somebody is off their rocker or if they're just trying to piece together what did occur. You know what I mean? Because it's a catch 22 in a beautifully perfect world. I mean, if everyone was like you and all the rest of my friends, yeah, I can take you all at word value. But throughout my existence, I have learned very harsh ways that you cannot take people at face value all the time. And that's always something that's really interesting to dive into and try to figure out, which is why we have like Robert Prevo, who's a mental health specialist. You can try to listen to people's interviews, and it is tough. I know there's data showing that people who actually were lying passed lie detector tests with ease, but then people that actually weren't lying about what occurred because it had been verified, not even cryptid, just verified in general, were failing lie detector tests. Again, right there, it just shows you both spectrums. So I always find that interesting. Well, this is going to be pretty interesting too to the audience. We are going to start with one that is, they're both nightmare fuel based, but there's two different layers in my opinion. So we're going to start with the one that is not as intriguing and dark, We have this first individual named Jordan Grider. He was 29. All right, so keep in mind throughout this whole conversation that, yeah, health issues can happen. It's just like bringing your car to a mechanic. In reality, yeah, when you get your sticker and everything is functioning fine, but then you could drive a couple miles down the road, right? And then something breaks on your car. No different, meaning you could leave a doctor's appointment, everything's fine, but then later in the day something happens that super stresses you out or whatever, and then you have a heart attack or something. All right, I'm just giving examples, meaning just because these people were in the realm of healthy doesn't mean things can't just occur. Meaning, recently, unfortunately, this person, rest in peace, buddy, named Stormy Outdoors, he passed away. He was a young kid that would go all around doing survival stuff. What happened is, as he was making his way back to his car, because he was getting colder and colder, he tripped and fell and then broke his nose, which pretty much they think was a massive reason why he froze to no longer existing. This kid was in perfect health too. So moral of all that is things can happen. All right. Well, this guy right here was in the Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness, Duluth, Minnesota. On October in 2018, he had gone missing. No one had heard from him for quite a long time. His family goes reaching out to the people that would be in charge of this park or area. The problem is, this guy was found in such a remote part of this reserve that it took quite a long time to actually even find Jordan because of how high the snow was. When they finally did find his campsite, all right, it was covered in deep snow. They did have to wait for it to thaw out a little bit. Once it did, they're able to look around the campsite. Obviously, there had been signs of a bunch of animals around there, footprints, etc. Nothing out of the ordinary. You're in the middle of the forest. His hammock slash sleeping bag was drenched in blood. Keep in mind, this guy used to kind of have a motto of, I'm not homeless, I live outdoors. He would always travel all around by himself, camping, seemingly done this his whole life, enjoyed it a ton, no issues. He would keep his knives extremely sharp. Before I proceed anymore, I'm going to throw you the mic right here. See what you think about where we've got to at the moment.
Okay, so I've read this story and I've gone through it, and like I've been rereading it, and you read what the game commissioner would say, you read what his mother said, and the questions that came out with me is like, this Jordan Grider was from the state of New Mexico, and like you said, he lived like this lifestyle of like, I like to be outdoors, and he likes to be lost in the wilderness, and it's reminiscent of a lot of survivalist type stories. But like when they found his body, like you said, the hammock that he was in was drenched in blood. But this person, to me, would have to come from New Mexico to Minnesota. You would have to be somebody that's very well prepared for a winter expedition or camping trip and being out there for a long time. So when they did find his body, they found the hammock and they found it drenched in blood. But to me, where they found him, they said the closest town was called Ely, Ely, and it was very, very remote, and it took them like 2 months to find him. But they really they found his 9mm Beretta outside of his hammock, and they found wolf prints and scat near it, and they only found 10 bones. So that, to me, it sounds like something happened within that hammock and his gun was not used. And they said that his, like you were talking about his knives and how the knives were all super sharp, but from the end of the article I read that none of his knives were used. So like this person without defending himself. So that's an interesting part of the story that like I have questions about. How would this person in the hammock, like literally, if something's attacking you, like let's say that it's something attacking you like a wolf, wouldn't the hammock be ripped apart? Wouldn't his clothes be ripped apart? But really, they found the hammock still drenched in blood, nothing on the hammock that looked like it was ripped apart, and they found 10 bones. So his clothes obviously had to have been dragged somewhere. And it's just an interesting story that he had weapons with him, but they weren't utilized.
Wow. Excellent observations. I don't really have answers, to be quite honest with you. According to his mother, I guess at first she was adamant it couldn't have been wolves, but later on now, seemingly, I don't know if someone has just twisted her words, but I see that she says she's come to the belief that it was wolves, which, all right, could be. It was a really hardcore winter. Animals would have been hungry, prey scarce. All right, yes, could occur. But what if this is just a hypothesis that my science team and I have been trying to think about? These wolves came in afterwards, obviously, and then disposed of the body, meaning this is why you only have a few vertebrae or bones. His knives were super sharp. You're not really supposed to ever shave with your knives. People do it still. What if, per se, Mr. Grider was getting ready to shave, and he was shaving away lightly, right? All of a sudden, something behind him makes a loud noise, or near him, which causes him to twitch. Because his knives are so sharp, what if he slit his own throat, right? Went back and sat down in the hammock because he potentially thought maybe it wasn't that bad, or he just knew, dude, this is it. Because, like you said, no weapon was dispersed. It really seems like something that could potentially happen as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that could happen. Like you could have something bump into the hammock when he's laying in it. If he had the knife in his hands, we don't know. Like to me, it would be super interesting to find out what the forensics or pathologist found from the bones. Like what kind of the 10 bones that they have left. Are there any clues left with those? Like what would possibly be a reason? But like with 10 bones left, you're probably not going to get a whole lot of information. Another thing was like they found him, like where they found him was an interesting place. It's in that boundary waters, so it was close to this beaver area, which is a huge swamp. So it makes you wonder, like, could something like a beaver have come out and like startled him, and like you said, he cut himself or hurt himself shaving.
No, I know it sounds like kind of, potentially humorous that someone would do that, but I mean, in actuality, that's happened so much. If there used to be a show, and I think it was on a network that was called like the Man Network or something, but it was like the most bizarre ways people have unalived themselves, and there were verified, documented cases. Things like that do happen. If you are sitting there, like you said, shaving or not expecting a loud noise, I believe that's probably the majority of people's reactions, unless you are a trained sniper who's expecting noise. But same thing, if you're not expecting noise, it's going to catch you potentially off guard. I don't know.
Though, like
really
the one
weird.
thing that like after reading that article, though, the one thing that I did remember reading was that his knives were never removed from their sheath. So,
Mm,
like he literally had a gun and he had these knives, and his mother questioned that at the very end, like none of that stuff
mm.
was utilized.
What the Christmas trees, dude. Yeah. That would, I guess, definitely, point in the direction of being ganked by something. And let's, stick with the wolves until we, potentially dive into something more, until we can find more evidence on it. But yeah, if you were attacked by a couple wolves inside of your tent or whatever and dragged off, and they have your arms and you can't grab your firearm and it gets ripped off, that could explain why your knives were never taken out.
One of the other things too that I read in that article was that in Minnesota they said that it's very, very unlikely that wolves will attack people. They're normally afraid of humans, and they said that there were only 2 cases of um, wolf attacks in the state of Minnesota. And I started thinking, like when after reading this is, like dogs can know when somebody has cancer, or
Hmm.
um, why can't a wolf? A wolf knows when something's injured or maimed or has maybe a potential illness. Like that could fall into the whole thing. We don't know.
Yeah, very interesting stuff right there for sure. And it's something that is, I don't know how much more clarity is going to be able to be brought onto the topic, because what we just did a deep dive into is pretty much all that really there is. A ton of articles, but all sums it up right there. Well, this next one to tie up our episode here is absolutely nightmare fuel. This man was basically called the last wild man. He is, in many survivalist and outdoors individuals' minds, the greatest outdoorsman that has never been heard of. We have Bart Schleyer. I probably, messed his name up a bit, but he was an outdoorsman. He was a guide. He was a tracker. He was a survivalist, and he was also a hunter. But keep in mind, he was also an artist, a writer, and a philosopher. So this man spent the majority of his time out in the wild, just like Jordan did. He was so good at what he did, Yellowstone National Park, when needing help tracking down grizzly populations and keeping them in mind of what was occurring, who'd they bring in? Bart tracked them down, put the collars on there. Epic stuff. He even crawled into a burrow of a grizzly bear that hadn't been responding, even though it was tagged on its collar, and they found out it was unalived, and he dug it out and buried it. This dude's a legend. All right. He was also brought over to Siberia. Yeah, you got to be pretty good at what you're doing if, well, Siberia and that side of the area, who isn't necessarily too fond of us, but that's not what we're here to talk about, is calling you over to help them out, right? So this man goes over. He ends up, well, helping to track down the Siberian tiger, which is super elusive and also a very rare species. But he has photos of himself in the den of the mother's cubs. She's out hunting. And we all know how mama gets when, it comes to babies, right? And he's holding and playing with them. This person was the one that snuck up onto predators. The reason I just explained all this is, again, just with Jordan, health issues could occur. Bart wasn't that old and would have technically probably been more or less in the prime of his life. All right. Again, I don't know if these people had gone to their doctor's appointments before doing this. No clue. I'm just saying how things could happen. Well, he, in September 2004, decided he wanted to go bow hunting and looking for moose alone in the Yukon Valley in good old Canada. All right, interesting. And before we dive into this more, well, two things. He was 49 years old. Again, not that old. And this was blamed on a grizzly. Keep in mind, in the area of the scat found of active wolves as well as active grizzlies, there were no signs of human predation in the scat, meaning grizzly bears. You would have caught the clothing in there and all kinds of stuff. Let's now continue. He's dropped off. Well, when his buddy comes back, Bart's nowhere to be found. His camp is abandoned. No signs of animal activity or anything coming in to eat his food. Just nowhere to be found. His friend, who's the pilot, then contacts the rest of Bart's family. They all explain what's happening, and they, well, reach out to the Royal Mounted Canadian Police. They tell them what has occurred. Police head out there. Their conclusion is Bart was consumed by a grizzly bear. No, that's not what his family was about or anyone that knew him, because everything that I had just spoken about previous to this, he's not going to be snuck up on by a grizzly, in their opinion, meaning you would have seen a sign of a struggle. All right, even if it got him, he would have known it more or less it was coming unless something happened, and nothing else was eaten there, which a bear wouldn't just eat Bart and not eat all his crates of food that are there as well. So his family, not buying what they're told, then go back out, and the pilot, again, with others, flies back out there. They then, after looking all around, find what seems to be a, I believe, inflatable raft down the river a little bit, which obviously must have been belonged to Bart. They head down there. As they approach the area, they can see Bart's bow rested up against a tree in a clearing where most likely he was watching for something. They could see the bag or a coat or something where he was sitting on it. You could basically, it's going to sound humorous, still see his butt cheek impressions on it. Okay, so he had probably been sitting there for a little bit. No sign of Bart. They end up finding his hunting goggles with blood splatter on it, and same thing, a few pieces of clothing. Well, after further research now and recontacting the Canadian Royal Mounted Police, they come back up in there. Same thing, now try to blame it on wolves and grizzlies. All that was ever found of Bart were a few pieces and vertebrae bones. What the heck, man?
So for me, after hearing this and reading what I read on the report of like this case, what struck me is this person, Bart, is very well prepared. Anywhere he goes, he's well prepared. You don't go into a grizzly den and not be prepared. But what sticks out to me the most is that this raft that they found where he was 100 yards away. If this was a grizzly bear, like somebody, normally they bury them, and then they'll come back to them. They'll go away and then they'll come back. So it to me that stuck out as like that's kind of strange that his body was only 100 yards from where that raft was. And then you said that his arrow was like right propped up against a tree. So this person that's like super well prepared to go into, like, he's going to be hunting moose, it seems like he was caught off guard. Like this means he got off the raft and something happened to him right there at that moment. So that's the part of this whole thing that kind of like has me thinking something happened right there right away. And he was doing, I guess he does like calls to mimic different animals, and he was trying to call in moose. So I don't know if he was calling in. And sometimes when people make calls and they're doing calls, like if I do a Bigfoot call, I don't know necessarily what they mean. You know what I mean? When you're doing a moose call, you don't actually know what that moose call means, you know?
Yep.
And, like I've traveled in Canada and backpacked in Alberta, and I know grizzly bear, they're right near the water. Like you can see them, like if you're up on a ridge and you look down, they're at the water, they're right there. So you'll see signs of them before, you get to the area. So if he was on that raft, he would have known getting off the raft if there were bear tracks right there. And I'm sure he was a super well prepared person. So this really strikes me as weird that a person that would be that prepared would get you know, immediately.
Yeah, straight up super bizarre stuff right there, man. I don't have an answer for that, nor does my science team. Like you said, seemingly he was surprised is the only thing that would make logical sense, but sometimes obviously things aren't supposed to make logical sense. The reason I say that is this isn't relevant to what we're talking about, but it is. So the crocodile hunter, for example, was an expert at what he did. Well, he must have known you shouldn't have pulled out the barb, right? I mean, the guy had worked with predators his whole life. Yes, a stingray isn't a predator, but it still has something that can be harmful to you. Well, he yanked out the barb, which ended up destroying his heart and the artery and caused him to be unalived. Could Bart maybe have just been lazy? I mean, even though he was great outside like that, could he just have took a lazy way out maybe and then did get caught off guard by a bear and not paid attention to the signs? I don't know, man.
I think what you just said is sometimes you let your guard down. Like when you let your guard down, that can be when you're in the wild.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yeah.
probably that's my feeling. What happened with him is like it just seems weird that this person that would be super well prepared would then end up losing their life at the very beginning of like this excursion, this hunting trip that he's on.
Mm-hmm.
So I just think that he was probably caught off guard by something.
I'm with you, man. I just don't potentially know what it is because I know enough for my science team that you would see in bear scat, like you said, the clothing ripped all up. And I've heard horror stories where people were still alive and they had been buried in the bear cache. And when people came back and couldn't believe they were still alive after like pieces of their arms had been eaten as they're in the cache and things. Yeah. So, I mean, they're not going to drag it too far away. Same thing with wolves. I've seen them attack hunting dogs and they don't pull them too far away. They consume them right there. I don't think it was really maybe wolves or bears, but again, I don't know. But like you said, moral of the whole thing is he must have been caught off guard. And not saying he was, but it's just human nature. When you've done something for so long, right? You just kind of take it for granted to an extent, I feel like, you know?
But like both of these stories too, I often think to myself, when you're out looking for something, you have to almost become that animal or whatever you're looking for. So you
Mm-hmm.
have to get into the mind of that animal. So there's like this intuitive knowledge. And also, when you're out, there's predators that are also seeking you. So like you don't know like what they sense about you. So maybe there was something about this Bart too that an animal sensed that he was injured. Like there could be something about him that something attacked him because animals know us as much as we know them.
Mm-hmm.
That's from what I know about nature.
Yeah, I mean, you hit it spot on right there. It's really just absolutely bizarre, both these encounters where you are quite a busy guy, so we do need to let you get boogieing. Is there anything else that you would like to touch base on tonight?
No, I mean, I really appreciate these stories. It was fascinating to read them and then, like talk to you about them. So thank you for having me on again.
Yeah, of course. Like I said, you're one of my good friends. I'd like to get you on as much as possible. So I always try to reach out and see, when you have time to sit down and hang out and give your thoughts on a topic. And yeah, next time we get a chance to link up, same thing. A day or so before, I'll send some things your way so you can just kind of dive into it, whether it's files from the good old North American Dogman project that we verified and that I have here, or yeah, just interesting things like we talked about tonight that definitely don't really seem to point towards total normal predation. And I definitely enjoy you coming to hang out with us, man.
Yeah, I appreciate you. Thank you.
Yes, to the Midnight Society. This will be the conclusion of our meeting for the evening. But no worries. Jamie will be back sooner than later. And surprisingly, you can catch him on our featured playlists of past episodes, or you can catch him, yes, in his own research on his Facebook group, which will be in the description. He has been in numerous small town monster documentaries slash movies. Do me a favor, make sure you keep track of what Jamie's up to, because if it wasn't for Jamie, we here at the Midnight Society would not have one of the most epic, unverifiable tracks on file. He's a super chill dude. Not many people this day and age are chill. Seems to be most people indulge in chaos. So if you would like a really smooth approach to things, and also you can see Jamie outside doing live, as we could say, hands on, or some people like to say boots on the ground. Not really a fan of that term. Yet you get to see all that. Whereas here, sure, I'll go live a little bit more in the future. But to everyone out there that likes to see their hosts or the people that are covering things speak and actually put a face to them, even though I've gone live before, yes, you don't need to worry about that with Jamie. It's live footage of him out and about. You see him plenty and you get to hear him speak. So, yes, please do check out all of our things, and we will be back very soon. Thanks for hanging out with us tonight, man.
Hey, thank you, Kenny.
My creatures, I do adore every single one of you, and thank you for tuning in tonight. If you did make it this far, you really are a legend. Please like, comment, subscribe, share, feed the algorithm, and I will see you very soon.